Thank you for coming today. First off, thank you to Russ for starting this initiative. I think it's really worthwhile, a really cool platform for us to showcase what we do here, where we want to go, and potentially also to role model to our students. What exactly it is we do, we're not face to face with them. I think thus far I've enjoyed it quite thoroughly. So today is the first step, probably of my second or third draft of this document and of this process. And like I said, by no means is it finalized. It's I'm quite open to what your thoughts are, what you think may work, may not work, and especially around the study side of things. So my title is going to be Agility Development in a Postpubertal Youth Athlete. So this is the person who may be 16 to 19, 20 years of age. So my general proposal is going to follow this framework, which is basically looking at the background, some of the rationale, some of the significance, some of the initial research questions. What are the biggest things that stick out to me in this area, and the study proposal itself. Now, I've chosen to define agility as an unrehearsed open skill that involves change of speed and or direction, and is due to response to an external stimulus. Now, this is opposed to something that like change of direction, which is a closed and a pre-planned activity, something like a 5-on-5, a T-test, something like that. So you can see that there's a big emphasis on the recognition of the stimulus and dealing with that right there. Alright, so thus far researchers highlight the importance of agility in performance. Now I think the basic crux of this would be, if you have a player who's more agile than someone else, they could actually evade, avoid contact, they can actually get past the person much easier, therefore their performance is going to be a little bit better. Now I think here someone like Benji Marshall, Sean Johnson, David McKenzie, those guys who are quite nippy, quite fast, and they're quite those electric players, as opposed to maybe someone who's a bit more run up the middle, bash. We've also found that research, and especially around agility, can differentiate between levels. It can differentiate in terms of, especially around those who are professional, semi-professional, and amateur. Generally, those who are more agile, therefore have more X factor, can actually and will actually eventually get to the top level. One problem though, in pediatric research, especially like youth athlete research, is actually one of the least and most under-researched areas. So therefore, we really need to figure out, or I want to figure out, how best to change some of the mechanisms, optimize this, and hopefully get someone to a higher standard. Now, agility itself, I've chosen to break down into two main camps. You've got your change of direction, speed, which underpins agility, and then your perceptual cognitive skills. So the big thing here is see the stimulus, react to see the stimulus, process the stimulus, and react to stimulus. I think so. That's the equivalent of seeing an opposition player running towards you, identifying the pattern they may be using, or identify what their next move could be, and dealing with that. So it's very much those three steps: pick it up, process it, react to it. And I think the big difference between that and change of direction is definitely the whole cognitive aspect of it, which revolves around that movement pattern. Some of the expanded components of agility actually include the stimulus, the physical characteristics, some of the motor control characteristics, and task-related characteristics. So the biggest thing here would be the stimulus. Perceptual constraints would be something like gaze, focus, attention. Some of the cognitive constraints may be anticipation, pattern recognition, concentration, and problem solving. So I think problem solving is actually quite a nifty and quite a cool one when you look at agility. Some of the physical constraints, which is probably better research in this area, would be something like your strength, your power characteristics, your thermometric characteristics, and also your fiber type, how they influence the agility side of things. And then your motor constraints, which is your motor control, your motor pattern development, motor pattern selection, and motor pattern adjustments. I think this is the best way to describe this. If those motor patterns are ingrained, it's much easier to go into that file within the brain, quickly access that and react to it. So I think motor pattern is actually a very important aspect of it. And then you've got your task-related characteristics, which may be specific, whether it's training, game, depending on the task. So Lloyd, Reed, Oliver, Myers, Nymphus, and Jeffries opened up or proposed a method of agility training around the developing athlete. Most of it's focused around the pre-pubertal, circupubertal, and the post-pubertal. So circupubertal being round about peak height velocity. And they've basically said that before peak height velocity, you want to focus more on the fundamental movement skills. They're 6%, 25% of change of direction, speed, and then 15% of reaction, agility, timing. Round about circupubertal, those equal out to 30, 40, and 30, with the main emphasis being on the change of direction, speed. Which is quite interesting because round about 13 to 14, which is peak height velocity for most people, is when you have the biggest change in change of direction. Post that, once your movement patterns are actually quite established, especially your fundamental movement skills, they then say that you should spend 60% of your focus, or your agility focus, should be on reaction, agility, timing. So you can see that once you've come through all that, your movements are pretty sus, your change of direction is pretty sus. Now you can just focus on those specific movements, specific to agility, those reaction, the stimulus recognition, and processing and reaction thereof. So I've broken this down a little bit more, and I've said that the fundamental movement skills are underpinned by the fundamental movement patterns, of which probably the most important would be the lower body push, lower body pull, the lunge, and especially the core. I think the core is very important, like the anti-rotational, anti-flexion extension, lateral flexion is quite important here, because you can have the biggest and strongest upper body, biggest and strongest lower body, but if the chain or that bridge between them aren't working properly or is ineffectively, you've got energy leak, it's just not going to work. So I think the biggest patterns those are the biggest patterns that underpin agility for me. So the big problem with pediatric literature thus far has been that most of the studies who claim to have done an agility training have actually been utilizing or testing through change of direction type of tests. So finding a good way, or reacting, or finding a good method of measuring that is quite important. So this is where you can start using speed lights or randomized touch lights to figure out what to best test that. What they've also found is that a task-based approach to agility is better. So I think it's horses for courses here. So if you want to get better at reacting to a sidestep, if you want to get better to reacting to an opponent coming towards or evading you, you need to be able to do that. And therefore they found that something like partner evasion drills and small-sided games are actually best for agility acquisition. Real life stimuli, real life processing on the spot, real life timing, and therefore your outcomes will be real life. So I think that's quite important to think. Now, when it comes to agility and the development of the youth athlete, most of that development happens prior to the peak height velocity and during the peak height velocity. which coincides quite well with the change of direction. So the big thing here to focus on is that the lighter grey, the lighter blue is the initial start of it, and it's just as important. The size of the font indicates the importance of the skill when it's being taught. And you can see there's a big difference between those two stages and our post-pubertal person, our post-pubertal adolescent. So this is that person who's maybe 16 to 19. And my question is, have we missed a bus? If they haven't actually picked it up in that optimal training window, have we actually missed a bus here? So what exactly happens to the post-pubertal youth adolescent athlete? What exactly are we looking at here? What happens if they've missed the optimal window of trainability? Now I know someone like Nick here has actually spent quite a bit of time on this. Quite a bit of time on the agility training, on on sort of reactive stimulus training. Hence the reason he's doing so well overseas. But what happens if you haven't all got mixed? So what I'm looking for, what I'm proposing is I want to look at a population of 16 to 19-year-old post-pubertal athletes. So people who have actually who are outside of this optimal training window, and preferably they'd be athletes who participate in intermittent, multi-directional, invasive and evasive sports. So what that means to me is that they've got a certain set of initial movement patterns that lends itself to agility training, therefore will benefit them. Also that there may be a skill transference there. So what I'm looking for here is that these guys will come from a myriad of sports. They're not specific to just maybe a contact sport, a netball. So they can actually be something from various sports. Why this area is also quite important to me is that the physical characteristics of this group is quite different to those pre-pubertal due to the sex androgen concentrations, especially around testosterone, growth hormone, and insulin-like growth factors. That itself lends itself to an increased muscle cross-sectional area, increased muscle pronation angle, and continued fiber type differentiation. So you can see that they have the capability of getting quite a bit stronger, and therefore force application becomes quite of interest. What also happens here is that we know that repeated exposure to stimulus helps with fast response times and enhanced cognitive capacity towards situational demands by strengthening existing synaptic pathways and with some synaptic pruning. So basically, those pathways or those synapses that are not as needed, they get pruned away, so they get destroyed. Another cool studies found that the perceptual and decision-making processes associated with agility is very trainable in this group. So I think these guys are quite ripe for this, and therefore some of my questions are actually be quite a bit of interest to me. The biggest thing and the most overruling question here is how do we best develop this group, especially in relation to agility. If they've missed a window, how do we rectify this? Are these athletes actually disadvantaged? Which characteristic is more important? The physical characteristic or the cognitive characteristic as it relates to agility acquisition? What's the best method of training the cognitive? Is it a traditional or is it through more technological methodology? Which is better, traditional agility training or small-sided games? Actually answering that question is going to be quite an important one for me. And if the Lloyd et al. Ratios are to be believed, which one's actually the best, which works best for this group. There's a couple of really cool questions here that I would love to answer with the thesis. So initial chapter 1 and chapter 8 is bulk standard, it's introduction and conclusion. Nothing too familiar, nothing too strange there. I hope the process makes sense. I hope the flow is logical, and this is where you guys will be really useful. My first 2 chapters, in terms of chapter 2 and 3, would be a more literature review. So I propose to look at the components of the constraints-based model of reactive agility. So looking at specifically these top 4, expanding on it, figuring out what exactly it means, trying to find a good literature, or produce a good literature standard from which to make informed decisions. I think it's looking at primarily the cognitive and the physical factors. I know there's going to be more physical factors, but actually trying to really boil down to the most important nitty-gritty side of things. Chapter 3, which I find quite exciting, is actually looking at the effectiveness of traditional versus small-sided games. So when I say traditional may be something like partner reaction, partner invasion type skills, reacting to a partner running towards you. Maybe the traditional where you stand there and maybe drop a tennis ball and you've got to react to that. That traditional type training versus a generic small-sided game where it's more sport-specific, game-specific, situation-specific. So quantifying the effectiveness of both interventions, trying to figure out which one will probably be the better aspect for it. And this is going to be a really cool one to inform later studies. So chapter 4 of study 1 would be the effect of the fundamental movement pattern training on agility within this population. So I know we keep saying that fundamental movement pattern training is important and we need to look at it, but is it as important for agility as it may be for optimal strength training? Is it as important for linear speed? I think it is, but remains to be seen. And I think the biggest focus here would be the lower push, lower pull, lunge, and core. That's going to be the biggest thing for me. And just to determine the true effect of the fundamental movement pattern training as it correlates with agility. Building on top of that, now I want to add in another stimulus. So from this point of view, traditional training, so adding a component of traditional training. So we're starting to build up into the rotary Lloyd type model now. Looking at traditional versus maybe as something more like a computer simulation or computer-based simulation. What it looks like is watching a video on screen, maybe even a big screen, and reacting to that stimulus. So you're stopping it and you've got to either, and it's the speed of reaction, whether they go left, right, up, maybe for a kick, something like that. And to figure out which one's actually going to have the bigger effect. Chapter 6, which is study 3, and then actually then looking at the traditional training versus small-sided games. I think this is going to be quite a fun one to look at, quite a topical one. So for my team-based athletes that I'll work with, I think this is going to be a really important study, because this is going to dictate whether current practices within or anecdotal practices are better than maybe more traditional, some more scientific approach. And then the last one is study 4. So all of these are built into this study, which then works out which of these ratios are actually the most important for this group in terms of agility acquisition. Will it be that the 20% functional movement fundamentals, movement skills, 20% change direction, speed, or add 6% reaction agility time, or will it actually be taking them right back to fundamental movement skills, change direction, where there's less emphasis on reaction agility timing? my initial thought is that we'd probably be best served with the middle approach of 30%, 40%, and 30%. We change direction, maybe more favoured. And I think the biggest thing is the aim and scope of what I'm trying to do here. I think for me it has to inform my own practice, but preferably also it would inform and be implementable by other practitioners. I think it needs to be important that it's pretty cost effective, easily applicable, or very applicable rather, and it doesn't really depend on massive investment. The intervention also needs to be quite general. I think the more general we go, the less specialisation there is. I think the better for the overall athlete, especially around specialisation and injury patterns as they are at the moment. And that's my references. Thank you, Captain.
Thanks. Right, man.
So initial thoughts, people? You're going to be busy, yeah. Like I say, it's quite an ambitious roster of studies. Really ambitious. Now, like I said, those are subject to change and not set in stone, especially those studies. And I think, I'll be bluffing myself, but I think that's the final product. I'd be quite interested to hear where you guys maybe see this, where you guys, what works for you, what doesn't work for you, what do you need more clarification on potentially?
Just look through the background.
That's huge.
What you're tackling. And being really broad, so you're going to be doing different studies, I'm assuming on a similar population, so like for example hockey players.
I'm hoping to get as many myriad of different sports as possible.
So therefore, and it's just a question, are you going to get better information if you narrow down studies and broaden the groups that you're actually studying? You know what I mean?
Yes.
Doing less with more.
Yes. So what you're saying is that looking at more cross-sectional. Yeah, I think that does come to mind. Like I say, that big. Yep.
It's massive.
It's huge.
And you could end up coming back with
nothing.
No, that's right. But you could do a lot of work and not find out much.
Yeah, exactly.
That's all.
Yeah. So I think. Yeah, I think if I had to take it to where it would be most of interest for me would be the small-sided game versus the more traditional approach. I think if I had to choose one area that's the most important, it would be that one, and potentially looking at those ratios. So I think there are studies within studies there that would be, so the narrowing down sort of things definitely is in my mind, because I think it's remember, I've got quite a few ideas in my head. It's just narrowing it down to those ones. I think it's going to be quite important.
Yeah. You kind of lead off that. You're talking about the population you're looking at.
Yes.
Talking about the ones that have missed that agility window. When you say that, are you meaning just people who are that age in general, or are you talking about people who haven't had that development through that window?
Probably look at that.
People who have come through and say a sport of hockey or netball, where they've done those agility style drills through that window. Are we still looking at them, or are we just looking at people who have not done the training through that window?
Not specific training towards that window, I think. So if they've done fundamental movement skills, or if they've just done generic sort of straight line speed stuff, that's okay. But there's very little, quite often, to just change direction.
So if you're following a team, a lot of those people in a 16 to 19 hockey team would have done that training, or some sort of training, right?
Some sort of training, yeah.
I guess I've got to follow from there. Have you had thought, Frans, on how you determine if they've missed that bus or not?
Yeah.
I think that has to be anecdotal, and I think that's one big thing that actually needs to come in. Whether I have a more inclusive approach to it and try and get everyone on the same boat and then build on that,
It may just be through testing, questioning, or testing participants to figure out, and then you have your own selective system of, hey, yes, this meets the criteria that you either missed or not missed that pass.
So I think it may be an inclusion-exclusion criteria based on normative data, which then will probably be the go-to for that.
I think that's a really good idea, because then you can almost structure your meta-analysis actually around answering that question. So using what you find there to inform your normative data, which then informs your selection criteria to be a participant within said studies.
Within sort of controlled experimental, see what comes from. Yep, no, so that's definitely on my list. So really awesome questions.
I was really keen to. You mentioned sort of this cognitive aspect and problem solving.
Yes.
Do you think that's why small sided games might be beneficial, not just purely from like the physiological point, but because the problems that are faced are more random, or?
I think the biggest thing there is familiarity and specificity.
Mm-hmm.
I think specificity to a stimulus where there's a clear outcome. I think maybe if you take a four-sided square where you score corners with football, you've got to evade your opposition player, your person marking you, and still get the ball into that corner position for a waiting player. So I think from that point of view, it's quite specific. So I think yes, it's more real world. I think therefore the application and the reaction thereof would be a bit better.
Cool.
Yeah, so it is situational problem solving.
So do you think agility then is in part like a learned response?
Yes. Yeah. And it's motor pattern. So it's establishing that motor pattern and establishing the motor pattern and then being able to effectively access it in the situational command. I think that's probably the best way to describe it from my point of view.
The studies, Frans, that you had, if you go thought around how you test or assess agility performance from either a traditional or a small-sided game approach, like how, I guess where I'm leading with this is how do you test the cognitive advancement that a person has with regards to agility?
Initially it will be mostly due to the test, the reactionary type, speed of change and those sort of things that would come. I think it's a combined thing rather than a differentiated approach. There has to be the forcification and the decision making all within one action rather than two separate tests.
Is that where you're randomised, whether it be screen approach or lights or?
Most probably be initially be lights. I'd like to get to a point where it's a randomised video. Just because reaction times are better to video than it is to lights. And it's been proven in research that especially training with video rather than lights actually leads to better movement patterns.
I think I remember seeing a thing about bowling, like bowling machine in cricket.
Yes.
Is having, I think in Australia they've got the video, and then it comes through the bowling machine, and like you're saying, it's showing that there's this massive improvement. So they're actually technically facing like Malinga and his arm action.
Yes.
Viewing it on the video versus just having the bowling machine coming in.
So that's a really cool. That's why I'm thinking that small-sided games, if done correctly, is very powerful, and I think it also brings in that fun aspect. It brings in fun, brings in engagement, brings in more application, brings in, I think, hopefully better outcomes. So I think you see why my head's going towards small-sided games a little bit more. Okay. Bringing the fun aspect to it.
On that, just to sort of, you mentioned about like the engagement and things. I'm just thinking back to sort of what you presented the other week. How do you think, like, do you think that idea of feeling more agile would affect someone's performance? I guess if you've got the correct stimulus or training environment for agility,
Yes.
are you then just increasing someone's confidence that they are agile?
Situational confidence plays a massive role in sport. We know that from a psychological point of view, it does have, even if it's just a placebo effect, it does have a massive effect on how you feel, and how you feel will have an effect on how you perform. I think from that point of view, yeah, situational confidence is quite important. So if I know that you're running towards me and you know you can step me, 9 times out of 10, you're going to go into that contact or basically try and evade contact as much as possible. Or feel confident in your skills to be able to do that. I think situational, it does make a big difference.
Not a broader question, but you
Go
said,
for it.
you said that the agility was quite under-researched. I noticed the reference that you used for that was 5 years old. Is there much going on in that area at the moment in the last 5 years?
Not that I've found just yet, which is pretty random because you think that within those 5 years it would have been, or 4 to 5 years it would have been a little bit more research. If you look at the people who did it, someone like Sophia Nymph is actually quite good in the change of direction side of things. Rob Myers is straight line speed. Rotary Lloyd and John Oliver are youth athlete development as a whole, looking at multifactorial, especially around movement pattern and maybe strength and power. It's quite an interesting that no one's actually really looked into it too much. As far as I know, there's no one's really looked into this specific cohort either.
The study that you had there, the different percentages for the different stages.
Yes.
What did they do to get those findings? Or
I think it's an approach from the wider work they did,
yeah.
especially around the fundamental movement skills in acquisition thereof. They quite, like I said, the 2 main authors, Rotary Lloyd and John Oliver, are a little bit more focused on that. So I think from that point of view, being strong in those movements will underpin agility. So I think that's what is a funnel down effect on that side and a funnel up effect on the reaction agility side. Because there's more control pre-pubertal but less control, it's a bit more open towards the end as the percentage reaction agility training goes up. So once again, coming from that closed skill to an open skill, and the interpretation and reaction there. Hopefully that's okay.
Yeah, good work, man.
Good.